Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Abigail Murray. I'm the Associate for Enterprise Development for the IDZ, and I wish to welcome you at our Supplier Awareness Day for 2017. The objective of the day is to share information about the IDZ and not to create unfair expectations with regard to opportunities, while encouraging local businesses to develop themselves for the oil and gas industry. Similar to this event, the IDZ hosts Togazi, stands for Talks on the Oil and Gas Industry, on a monthly basis. And Togazi has been running from 2015, and we have it on a monthly basis. Our last one was held on the 19th of this month. And to date, we've shared what the oil and gas industry is, what it means for us in just our daily life, jobs on the oil and gas industry. We've spoke about standards, and we've also touched on skills in the oil and gas industry. Today, we wish to share future plans in infrastructure, enterprise development. We'll touch on supply chain and skills. And the important message that we want to get across today is that infrastructure is where the IDZ is at the moment, but is not really our focus. Our focus is the oil and gas industry, and our core function at the moment is the setting up of a marine and rig repair facility in the port of Saldanha. I just want to take you through our program. The opening and welcoming I've done. I will then talk about our enterprise development, and then we'll have our infrastructure team, Kulisa Chuvile and De Toy, after which we'll have a short comfort break, and then Dale Paulse, as our supply chain manager, will handle his presentation, and a skills presentation from Patrick Lakabane, after which we'll have a Q&A session. And then, as per normal, we'll have time set aside for networking. We have quite a big part of our staff component here today, so we'll probably introduce most of them as we go along. And we want to encourage you to make use of the networking opportunities, so you can speak today to our staff members regarding the different aspects of work. On enterprise development, I'll talk a bit about the background, how long the IDZ has been busy with enterprise development, then the interfaces, who we engage with on a daily basis, but then also talk about how enterprise development interfaces with the internal units within the IDZ. Then database registrations is something that confuses people sometimes. Then just general enterprise development, what we plan to do, and how we go about things. And then we'll talk about supplier development. Normally people ask, what is the difference between supplier development and enterprise development? And then we are also busy with the integrated approach that I want to just also tell you about. On the background of enterprise development, like we've mentioned before, we want to develop small businesses for the oil and gas industry. And enterprise development has been a focus area of the IDZ since 2013. There's communication platforms that has been established since. And project and intervention funding must be sourced. That means that the IDZ is not funded for enterprise development. So, yeah, I'll touch on that later as well. Then the interfaces. The IDZ has established the IDZ Business Forum. The IDZ Business Forum is 10 member-based organizations in Saldanha that also meet on a monthly basis. So as mentioned, these forums have small business as members. So they discuss with the IDZ the expectations of their members, and the IDZ communicates directly with them about what's happening in the IDZ, what our standards are and what our expectations are from small business. The idea is for that information then to filter down to the the clients of these forums. So the business forum comprises of the BBBE Forum, the Saldanha Bay Black Women's Association, the Weskus Sakekamer, Best Forum, the West Coast Business Development Center, and a few others. Then the internal divisions of the IDZ. The interfaces of enterprise development is with infrastructure. So enterprise development is then part of a steering committee, where enterprise development is then part of, tenders and evaluations and interactions with small business and so forth. What's important for us to say with infrastructure, as I mentioned before, is the IDZ infrastructure has a starting point and a finishing point. So it is viewed as not sustainable development. Like I mentioned before, it is where the IDZ is now, but it is really not our focus. Then supply chain. Small businesses have a lot of education goes into the development of a small business. And then the supply chain rules needs to be communicated and changes now and then, which is part of what brings about today. Then the ease of doing business, the GAZI, and the interface of services needed in the zone. Ease of doing business, we have an executive called Benny Mahlangu, has extensive experience in the oil and gas industry, and for those of you who've attended the GAZI before, Benny presented quite a few of that and shared her experience on what she's experienced in the oil and gas industry and working on oil rigs and so on. Within the IDZ, the Ease of Doing Business unit seeks to create an edge with the Saldanha port. And then in business development is where the engagements with investors takes place, and in investor and industry-facing services in the zone. So we have a colleague, Ms. Laura Painke, is the business development executive, and enterprise development engages with her sometimes. And then our skills unit, obviously, we need skills and develop skills for the zone. And from time to time, we will refer small businesses to the skills unit as well, just with regard to the opportunities that exist in that department. And then commercial is linked to the services in the zone. Then with regard to database registrations, most of you are registered on the IDZ Supplier Development Database. That database simply means that you are a business wishing to be developed for the oil and gas industry. However, the IDZ is a state-owned company, and if you want to do business with any state-owned company, you also need to be registered on the Western Cape Supplier Database and the Central Supplier Database. So you cannot think that if you're registered on the Supplier Development Database of the IDZ, that you are automatically now registered on the Western Cape Supplier Database. All state-owned companies, you need to be registered on the Central Supplier Database and the Western Cape Supplier Database. Then on enterprise development, the Supplier Development Database of the IDZ is about 500 to 600 small businesses registered on the database. The businesses registered on the Supply Development Database are in various stages of business. So some are startups, some are existing, some are industry-facing businesses, and some are just auxiliary services. Many are startup businesses, and then some are directly linked to the oil and gas industry, and others are indirectly linked. Partners that we have in enterprise development includes CEDA, Productivity SA, Absa Bank, and the UWC. I will elaborate on those as I go along. This is just a picture of training that we facilitated a few months ago. Like I mentioned, partners in this is the UWC and Productivity SA, but also Absa Bank. The trainings from Absa Bank was accredited training, and we wish to build on that going forward. Yeah, that is training from Productivity SA. You will see some of the people are in the crowd today. Then on supplier development, like I said before, enterprise development is more the development of small businesses generally. And supplier development is when a small business becomes a supplier to a bigger business. So the development of that supplier then is called supplier development. So it is when you supply to the big business and they decide that they want to spend time, money and effort in developing your business. That then means supplier development. And what the IDZ plans to do with the 500, 600 businesses on the database at the moment is to have assessments done on the businesses. The first assessment would just look at the information that we do have on the system and clean up the database and so on. But then also to determine what is industry-facing businesses so that the IDZ can get to supplier development, from an enterprise development to a supplier development initiative. This initiative is funded by the DTI, and we foresee that this will be done from 2017 up to 2019. So, like I say, we plan to do the assessments, but we also want to identify the gaps in the businesses linked to the oil and gas industry, and that would become our supplier development initiatives. It will basically dictate what the gaps are in the business and where we will spend time and effort and get partnerships to develop those businesses. And it will be an ongoing exercise. When I speak about industry-facing businesses, this is how the IDZ prioritized its sectors. So we will focus on fabrication and construction, repairs and maintenance, equipment and material supply, logistics and warehousing, and auxiliary services. It is very broad, but for those of you who's attended our Togazi sessions, you will know now that for each and every sector, there's a different standard that the business has to comply with. And with our assessments, this is really where we want to get at. We want to see who of the businesses features in which sector, and then identify then what the gaps are and how we plan to address them. So in our Togazi session, we've handled compliance and certification, where we had at our last one, we had OPITO, that is an industry-led standard. And we've spoken about diving training in the business and so on. So we want to encourage you then to also attend our Togazi sessions on a monthly basis. Then our integrated approach. Enterprise development and supplier development is done at most of the corporate companies because it is part of BEE compliance and so on. So partners in the area that the IDZ is busy working with includes ArcelorMittal, Sea Harvest, Lucky Star, Tronox, the municipality, and a few others. And the idea is that we find one solution for enterprise development. So like I mentioned before, enterprise development is in the broad, small businesses wanting to be developed. Supplier development is a bit more focused, industry specific. So the IDZ supplier development and ArcelorMittal's and Tronox and Sea Harvest supplier development will all be different. But we've identified that enterprise development a lot of it is similar. What we require from a small business before we work with them, the standards, and so on. We've also identified that Transnet has 5 divisions. And the expectation is that a small business would then need to register with each of these divisions separately, then go to ArcelorMittal and register on that vendor list, then come to the IDZ and register on that vendor list. So the idea, just the very first aspect that we wish to address is to create a portal where small businesses would register the information once and all the corporate companies would have access to that. But then we can also then measure what development we all are engaged in with what business, and then also measure growth more effectively. We've received seed funding from the Department of Economic Development and Tourism for that. So that's just in acknowledging them as a partner as well. So in a nutshell, that is enterprise development and what we plan to do. I will just hand over to Kolisa Chivule. He works in our infrastructure team, and he will discuss with you infrastructure plans. Thank you.
As Abigail said, my name is Kolisa Chivule. I work for the infrastructure unit within the Saldanha Bay IDZ. I will be taking you through the first part of our infrastructure presentation, where I'll be looking at the background of the infrastructure unit, our completed projects thus far, our current projects, our future projects, opportunities, and also looking at the contractor development program within the Saldanha Bay IDZ. Just to give you a little bit more background on the infrastructure unit within the Saldanha Bay IDZ, we are funded by the Department of Trade and Industry, the DTI, through the SEZ Fund, which is the Special Economic Zone Fund. And then we have been granted a once-off grant for a period of 3-year cycle from 2014 up to 2017, where there is some projects that were identified within that 3-year cycle period, looking at the external supporting infrastructure, which is infrastructure which is not really within the zone, which we look at infrastructure like the Besansklip Reservoir, the development or the upgrade of the Saldanha Bay Wastewater Treatment Works, and the development of the Saldoc Land, which is the north portion of the Saldanha Bay IDZ, and then the development of the Portland, which is the southern portion of the Saldanha Bay IDZ. The completed projects thus far, we have completed the internal engineering services within the Saldoc Land, which was completed towards end of last year. We've also completed the upgrade of the wastewater of the Saldanha Bay Wastewater Treatment Works, which was also completed in the third quarter of last year. At the moment, we're currently running a project which is an external supporting project, which is the extension of Besansklip Reservoir, which is focused for completion in the third quarter of this year. We're also running the Link Road and Bridge. I'm sure most of you people have seen it while you drive on Main Road 559. Which is the Link Road and Bridge, which is linking the north side of the Saldanha Bay IDZ and the southern side of the Saldanha Bay IDZ, which is forecast to be completed within the second quarter of this year. The erection of the Saldoc Land security fence, which is forecast for commencement at the second quarter of this year. The future projects that we plan on undertaking is the internal engineering services in the Portland, the development of the southern portion of the Saldanha Bay IDZ, which is forecast for commencement in the third quarter of this year, and then the development of our access complex, which is forecast for commencement on the third quarter of this year, and then the Eastern Link Road access road, which is forecast for commencement on the fourth quarter of this year. At this point in time, I want to just hand over to my colleague, Anne Dutoit, then she will take you through the second part of the presentation.
Morning, everybody. My name is Anne Dutoit, and I'm Associate Infrastructure and Environment, and I will be taking you through the opportunities of what the infrastructure could offer. Okay, now for the medium term, the building of the security complex, we're still in the design stage, and we're looking at starting in the third quarter of this year, 2017. The servicing of the Portland is running also with that. We're still in the design stages, and then the Eastern Access Road. In showing you what we have for the future and what we're planning for this year and maybe even till the end of this year, beginning of the 2018, I want to talk about the Contractor Development Program. The Contractor Development Program is an initiative piloted with the erection of the Saldoc fence. Those of you that don't know what the Saldoc fence is, it is the first section that we have serviced the IDC land. That is the one on the one side of the main road, where we're building the bridge across to the Portland. The internal services has been completed there, and we need to then put up a security fence. It's not an ordinary fence that you just put up. It is actually, we've gotten the design from SARS, because the area that we are fencing in will be then a tax-free zone. Okay, so to attest this new approach to the contractor development and participation of the project, what we did is the procurement approach means all direct contracts with Saldanha by IDZ. Because of the lessons of the past, as Abigail has mentioned in our database, there's a lot of startup businesses, and within infrastructure, we are concentrating with this pilot project on the startup businesses, that is your CIDB 1s to 4s. Those of you that don't know what CIDB means, is Construction Industry Development Board Standards. So what we're looking at is we're appointing basically, or where we started is, we put out an expression of interest, because we did not know how many businesses out there are startups or how many businesses are sitting on levels 1 to 4 CIDB gradings. After the expression of interest with an evaluation committee which included economic development and a whole steercom, we've then identified companies that we could then pilot in putting up the fence. Before I even go to the appointment of construction management services, what the contractor development program at this stage means that each company is going to be a main contractor. Okay, so they're not subcontracting, we're taking them through a main contractor program, developing them to move from a 1 to a 2 and a 2 to a 3. And within this, the support that we are bringing with the contractor development program is the appointment of a construction management support service to assist and train developing contractors in technical and managerial concerns. You will later hear when our procurement manager stands here, all the standards, all the compliances that you need before you even start working. The contractor development support services elements separated to improve contractor cash flow and P&E management. So what we've done with the CELDOC fence, we've appointed a fence panel supplier. Those are the panels of the fence, and like I said, it's not our design, it was prescribed by SARS, so that we've put out an open tender. That is just supply. Then the appointment of a local manufacturer, that is the posts, and we have appointed a local manufacturer that is at this moment manufacturing the posts for us. And when I say local, I mean from the Saldanha Bay municipal area. And then, of course, we have appointed 7 local building contractors to be part of the contractor development program. As you can see, the model that I was speaking about, you have your IDZ as the main employer, and then you have your emerging contractor as a main contractor. The blue and down to the yellow. And if you look around you, that is the support services that we as the IDZ is offering the emerging contractor. As you will see, the professional services and design, the construction management support, the compliances. Now, you've heard my colleagues speak about the access complex, and that will basically, after our pilot project of the contractor development program with the CELDOC fence, we will then move on to the access complex, which is a much bigger multi-million rand project. And this is just a graphic representation of how we think it would look. So taking the contractor development program further, here we are working with a much bigger project with much more risk. So the next model that I'm presenting that we are looking at wanting to do after the fence is done, or the CELDOC fence is erected, this will be then the next model where Saldanha Bay IDZ as employer, we have the main contractor. When I say main contractor, it's not that we are excluding the small contractors, it's just that the risk is much bigger. However, we do have the emerging subcontractors which will be part of the contractor development program, and all the support will be around to support the subcontractor. Thank you.
Morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm not going to say my name again, having already mentioned it. Thank you for Kashifa and everybody else for inviting me to this great event. I was actually double booked, so I must rush to Brackenfell after this. But I think this is way more important. I think 2 years ago, when I started with the IDZ, we had a similar event, and I did quite a long presentation on what's expected from suppliers, contractors, service providers when they're going to conduct business with the IDZ going forward. And in the space of 2 years, not a lot has changed in the supply chain management environment. So when I was sitting down doing the presentation, I thought, I'm not going to rehash everything that I said at that time. And I want to focus more on what we've learned from the IDZ and what some of the suppliers and contractors that I've spoken to over the last 2 years have learned in terms of what the requirements are from us as a client and what we require from you guys when you submit quotes, tenders, and actually provide the service after the contract has been concluded. So the good news for today is that there is no additional requirements for you guys going forward for this financial year, or at least for the foreseeable future. So for those of you that are sitting here and understand the basic rules about the registration, about tax clearance certificates, how to quote, how to tender, it remains exactly the same now. The only major change that came in, and it's quite a big change from our previous Minister of Finance, was the new preferential procurement regulations. It doesn't impact so much on use, it impacts on us in the way we advertise our tenders going forward. But I think when there's more clarity from our provincial treasury in terms of how we're going to implement it, we'll have specific workshops when we advertise tenders through our briefing sessions. So what are we trying to achieve today? Provide the basic understanding of how to tender or quote. What is new in the SM environment? As I said, there's nothing new. How do we give ourselves an opportunity to compete against each other? And what have we learned over the last 24 months? I think the last one is quite important for us. So the SBIDZ, I think you've heard it in the other presentations, we are a public entity. We are required to be compliant with the following. Obviously the Constitution of South Africa, the Public Finance Management Act, the national and provincial regulations, the Preferential Procurement Policy Framework Act, the National and Provincial Instruction Notes, and very important for the construction industry is the Construction Industry Development Board Act. So what are the objectives for supply chain management? In many, let's say, organizations, it's seen like supply chain management wants to get a clean audit, wants to create a checklist, tick all the boxes, and forget about the most important thing, which is actually supporting the operations like Patrick them and Abigail them, and ensuring that you guys get adequate support, that you guys can actually compete on the highest level when you actually submit your quotes and tenders. So what we're trying at the moment is we're trying to streamline business processes. What we found in the first 2 years of operations is that we advertise our quotes in various manners, and we request different documents and sometimes unnecessary documents from suppliers, and that becomes, for lack of a better word, it puts suppliers off, and they don't want to quote because they must submit a host of documents for a 50,000 Rand quotation, and you're not guaranteed of even getting the work. So for this financial year, we're going to streamline our business processes internally. We're going to create one platform where we advertise everything and create more awareness before we actually advertise our tenders. We've also streamlined our tender documents and our requirements. I think Anne spoke about the contractor development program and the fence project. We took a tender document, which sometimes in the construction industry can be up to 400 pages, and we streamlined it to 50 pages maximum to make it very easy for contractors to understand how they have to tender. The requirements we've cut down as well. We're not asking for stuff like tax clearance certificate anymore. If you register on any of the databases, the information now is readily available for us, and we'll make sure that we get it. Regular contact and training. It's happened quite frequently in the last 6 months. I think from September last year. I'm primarily based in the Cape Town office, but I came down to support and have one-on-one sessions with suppliers to help them put together tender documents, help them get registered, help them understand how to package a tender document or a quotation. And I think going forward, that's going to be a very important aspect for us. And then obviously value for money in tenders. Because we're state-owned and with all the stuff happening at the moment in the political environment, we have to be seen that we're actually getting value for money. That means not only that the job gets done, but that we're not paying exorbitant prices for certain works or services. So these are the basic minimum requirements that we are expecting from everybody sitting in this room going forward. You must be actively registered on the Western Cape Supplier database. Now, what actively registered means is, although it's a once-off registration process and it's a manual process, it's a set of documents that must be completed, and there's a number of attachments that you have to add to that, like your tax clearance, your declaration, your BEE. That once-off process does not mean you cannot be you cannot be suspended by the Western Cape Supplier database. There's three very important documents: the tax clearance, the BEE, and the declaration. Those documents are valid for a period of 12 months only. If those documents expire, you'll be notified by the Western Cape Supplier database that your account is suspended. Now, how that works, or how that impacts on us is, if we're closing a RFQ or tender tomorrow, the very next day I download all the supplier's information from the Western Cape Supplier database. If it says you're suspended, then you're made non-responsive. That information or that comment or that element is clearly defined in any document that you're going to receive from us. By the time and the date that the tender closes, if you are suspended, we cannot accept your quote or your bid. So it's very important that you can email Ariba and they'll send you confirmation that you are still actively registered. And they'll tell you exactly when your documents will expire. You take that printout or that email that you get from them and you attach it to your documents. And that shows us that you are not suspended. Similarly, the CIDB, and this is only for the construction industry, the CIDB does the exact same thing. They will suspend you if any of the documentation that you have submitted to them have now become inactive. Similarly, with the Western Cape Supplier database, print it out, attach it to your quotation, and that's your proof that you're not suspended. The last requirement for us is the Central Supplier database. This is the one that came in effect 1 April 2016. If you are registered, it's an electronic online registration process. Literally takes 20 minutes if you have all the information in front of you. And some of the information that you're going to require is your owners or your directors' information with the ID numbers, contact details, your bank account information. If you have any offices, subletting or anything like that. I know everybody struggles with the commodity list. Believe me, I struggle with it as well. If you do struggle with a commodity list, because you have to obviously tell the National Treasury what industry and what space you're playing in. Are you offering catering services, transport services? Are you a contractor? If you cannot find anything that is linked to the services that you offer, you can then email them and they'll respond to you. We've got something which is called the CIPC, which is the Company's Intellectual Property Commission in South Africa. Now, if you are PTY Limited, you have to be registered with the CPIC. If you're an individual and you're not a PTY Limited, then you don't have to be registered. But if you are, then you have to be registered. That's the fourth requirement, and those are the only 4 requirements you're going to see in any RFQ that we advertise. For tenders, it's different because there's additional information we require. But for the purposes of quotations, that's the only 4. Then obviously the BE certificate is very important. The affidavit is now, I think, very applicable to everybody. That affidavit, when it gets signed off by yourself and by a commission of oaths, does not mean it's valid. It still gets sent to the Provincial Treasury in the Western Cape and they do a verification of that certificate. If they verified your certificate, then they send it to Ariba and then I can pick it up from Ariba's side. So, general request for quotations. We ask for a minimum of 3 quotations from actively registered suppliers. This is very important. Quotations must be provided on time, must be provided in the format requested. The minimum information must be included in quotations. Lately, we've asked, even for quotations, we've asked for CVs of key staff, we've asked for project plans, we've asked for work schedules, we've asked for training manuals, we've asked for various things. Those things have to be submitted. If they are not submitted, then obviously your quote is not going to be accepted because we need to evaluate you against somebody else that's competing with you in for the same commodity. quotations above 30,000 will include a score for BE points. The total score for over 30,000 will include price and BE. So if you're submitting a quotation and your quotation is more than 30,000, please ensure you submit the BE certificate. Formal tenders, well, we advertise 21 days as required by the legislation. Tenders will be advertised in the Westlande. We got permission from the Provincial Treasury, and as agrees with the Business Forum, we can advertise in the Westlande. In the government tender bulletin, and I think I left out the e-tender portal, sorry. So the e-tender portal, you can also find our tenders on that platform. Internally, I think going forward for this year, our tenders are also going to be placed on our website. Business forums will be informed before we go out to tender. Submit information as requested in the bid documents, namely 1 or 2 envelopes. We've had 1 or 2 problems in the past. If we ask for 2 envelopes, it means your technical proposal with all your standard bid documents, your tax clearance in 1 envelope, and then your price and your BE in a 2nd envelope. The reason for that is, if we do not find you responsive for envelope 1, we're not allowed to open envelope 2, and we send it back to you. Submit on time, generally by 11 a.m. I think, except for the general goods and services, almost 95% of our tenders, the closing time is always going to be 11 o'clock, maybe 12 o'clock, and it's going to be 24 Main Road, just down the road. All tender documents, namely WCBD 1, tax clearance, WCBD 3, 4, and 6 must be fully completed, signed, and dated where required. Those are the general documents for general goods and services. In the construction industry, it's called something different, but it's the exact same information that's required. And then functionality will always be included in the tender documents, and evidence must be provided that they can emphasize that the bidder has the technical ability to deliver on the scope of the work. Successes. I say we've had a very good year. I think 15 or 14, 15 was my first year, 15, 16 was the second year. I think we've had a very good year up to the end of April or March 2016. We've advertised many of our RFQs, specifically a lot of the skills stuff, where only local service providers were appointed, and I think that's very important. We're trying to uplift the community, and we are trying to ensure that we sustain the local businesses. So in that regard, a lot of the RFQs, transport, catering, skills, and many others have gone to the local service providers. So I think for us, is a great success. The business forums have been regularly updated with tender information. So before we go out, we inform as many people as possible in the area. This is what's coming. This is what we're looking for. Get yourself ready. Get into contact with the right people so that you can actually compete when the tender goes out. We've received excellent service of most of the RFQs and tenders advertised, and I think that's really good for all of us, especially from the SBIDZ side. Many new suppliers have registered with Ariba and CSD. I think almost everybody on the 500 to 600 people on ABI's database have registered. And then many of the suspensions of the databases have been lifted as well. Then some of the challenges. Late submission of RFQs and tenders. There's been quite a few cases this year, not many, but it's unfortunate that we cannot accept any late responses. At many of the tenders especially, we hand out a copy of those that have submitted the tender once it closes at 11 o'clock. It is very unfair to those that have made the effort and time to get the tender submitted by the time it's supposed to, and if we allow anybody else an opportunity, it's going to be totally unfair, and it's going to put us as the IDZ at huge risk. Lack of information submitted as requested. I mentioned previously, we clearly outline what information we require, whether it's a project plan, whether it is a organogram, whether it is CVs. We go as far as to say we don't want the old school 10-page CV, we want a 1-page CV with critical information, and we actually detail what information. But the people just don't submit the information. That means that if we were allocating 20 points out of 100 for people with experience, then you don't get the 20 points out of 100. That means automatically you stand a very slim chance of qualifying. So it's important that if we ask for certain information, there's a reason why we're asking for it, that you actually submit it. And please submit it in the format that we're requesting. Suppliers attend briefing sessions late or don't attend at all. I can guarantee you for all our tenders, especially in the construction industry, we have compulsory briefing sessions. And the reason and the purpose of those briefing sessions is it's not for us, but it's for you to ensure that you understand as much as possible about the requirements and the scope and the specifications. What's also very important that if you don't come to these sessions and you have not prepared, then it serves almost no purpose for you. You must come to these sessions knowing what questions you need answered, so that when you go back, you can put together a really quality tender document and give yourself the best opportunity. Capability and ability, not always what's required in terms of the scope. I think it's very important that we understand what resources we have available and if we are actually able to deliver on the scope. It's going to put a lot of people at risk, yourselves and us, if you cannot deliver on the scope of the project. And the main aim of why we're doing stuff locally is to grow your business, as Abigail has said, and to enable you to become self-sustainable or sustainable over the long period of time. But you have to ensure that you have the ability and the resources to be able to deliver. Another concern of us is that sometimes we send out RFQs and we get no responses. Now, obviously, because we are a state-owned entity, we have certain targets that we have to achieve. So timelines are crucial for us. So when we send out an RFQ, and it's specifically for the local people, we know you guys can do the work, and we really ask you to respond. In many occasions, we have to send the stuff out twice or thrice, and we don't require, or we don't even obtain 3 quotes. And then the last one is many suppliers are suspended on the database when the RFQ or tender is closed. I think I mentioned this before. If you are suspended, please make sure that you get the suspension lifted before you tender or before you quote. Otherwise, we cannot accept your quotation at the end of the day. I think that's me. Thank you so much for all the time.
Thank you, Dale. I think what's important to mention on the Western Cape Supplier Database and the Central Supplier Database, we encourage people to register on these databases. And I think what people are not aware of is that these databases have interfaces with SARS and whoever you are registered with. And then every day, your compliance is checked. And if you default, as soon as you default, you get deregistered. So part of it, you need to register, but you also need to remain a compliant business citizen. I think that is the other lesson that we just need to communicate regarding these registrations. Our next presentation is on skills development, done by Mr. Patrick Lakabane.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Patrick Lakabane, and I'm responsible for skills development within the IDZ. The purpose of my presentation is really it is actually focused towards suppliers of skills development, and just to paint the bigger picture in terms of why it is important for suppliers of skills to conform to certain standards, legislative requirements, and also why we're doing this. The IDZ skills development within the IDZ is a value proposition. It is a value proposition to both our prospective investors and also to the community at large, because what we're trying to do is to capacitate the local people with the necessary skills that we're going to need within our infrastructure projects, and also in the near future when we become operational, and also to ensure that when investors come and when operation starts in the IDZ, we don't need to import skills as it was said previously in this area or with previous projects where we were inundated with complaints that people locally are not employed, but people from outside is employed. So our job really in the skills development unit is to ensure that we develop skills that's going to be needed within the IDZ, and our skills development projects and initiatives are really targeted towards opportunities. So we are not training for the unemployed markets, we only train in areas where we know that skills will be needed or those skills will be applicable within the IDZ, either in our infrastructure rollout or going forward during our operations. Now, the important element of the value proposition is proposition and its regulatory mandate is, amongst other things, to facilitate skills development. Now, if we facilitate skills development, we then can ensure that we create jobs, because you cannot create jobs where there's no skills development or where there's no capacity to respond to those jobs. Saldanha Bay, unfortunately, is oil and gas sector and marine manufacturing sector. It's a new sector in this area, and so we could not expect that all the skills requirements that we want will be here unless we have implemented some interventions to ensure that we've developed those skills. Second thing about the value proposition in the IDZ skills development framework is that we want to ensure effective response to demand-driven industry. Now, traditionally in this area, skills development was not driven by the industry. It was not demand-driven also. It was driven by the suppliers of skills. So the suppliers of skills, like your colleges, your private training providers, they would have determined what skills they want to produce or develop, and then most of the time those skills would not align to what industry want. Now within the IDZ, our skills development are really demanded. It's those skills that is needed by the industry, and hence we say it's demand driven. The second thing is we want to move from a fragmented project approach to coordinated long-term planning and delivery. Now you would know that skills development happens at all levels in government and society, private sector and the public sector. And the traditional silo approach of skills development did not deliver the required outcomes that is needed. What we are trying to do in partnerships with the public sector and the private sector to ensure that we have a coordinated skills development approach, and also we bring together resources so that you can ensure that skills development is effective, and also it cuts across all sectors of society. And then lastly, to develop a purpose-built IDZ skills plan linked to the full circle in the IDZ. What we mean by that is that the IDZ currently, we're finding ourselves at the infrastructure rollout. So infrastructure is not long-term. It is to develop a particular product, and then after we become operational, it becomes medium and long-term. We want to ensure that what we're delivering now will go beyond infrastructure and also beyond the operation phase, so that we can know if we develop a skill at a particular level, that skills can then be developed at the later stage. Our core pillars of our skills development framework now, the SDSF is our skills development framework. It is actually our policy document that regulates skills development within the IDZ. It lays down the strategic intent and also the policy position with regards to the approach to skills development. Now, this is what we call our Bible in terms of how we're going about to develop skills develop skills and training within the IDZ. Now, what makes us unique is that we are not a demand of skills. That's the first one. We are also not a supplier of skills. So when we say we're not a supplier of skills, we mean we are not a training institution within the IDZ. The IDZ is an organization that consists of around about 35 people, I think, around about there, and that is where we're going to stop. So we are not going to develop within the IDZ beyond that. Hence, we need partnership with private and public skills development institutions who will then be the suppliers of those skills. In terms of the demand side, is that we are not going to employ people that we are training outside of the IDZ. It is our investors that eventually going to take up those skills. During the infrastructure phase, it's also those contractors that we appoint that will eventually absorb those skills. And what also makes us unique is that we are not a traditional government institution. We are a state-owned company with a particular focus and a particular mandate to deliver infrastructure within this project, and then to ensure that that infrastructure will be used by the private sector to create those jobs and then economic opportunities beyond. We are actually a conduit. We are a catalyst. We are a facilitator for skills development. So what I do is we identify the intervention and the need. We then seek funding. We appoint private training institutions, and then we are actually facilitating and coordinating that whole process of skills development. For us to do that, it's important that we form strategic partnerships with people in both the private sector and also in the public sector. And that partnership is embedded in what we call the 3 pillars of our skills development framework. And those 3 pillars are based on places and programs, funding, and also people. The argument around this is that the one leg cannot stand without the other. If you don't have funding, we cannot train, because training is money. You guys will know about the fees must fall and everything that happens elsewhere in the country. the past 2 years. The second one is, if you don't have places and programs, so if you don't have the institutions that will supply skills development at the end of the day, we cannot deliver skills, because we took a strategic decision way back in 2013, 2012 to say, unlike other IDZs like Kucha, etc., we are not going to build our own training center internally and roll out skills development, because we have a diverse set of skills that we want to deliver, and it would have been impossible to deliver that in one center that we built. Hence, we outsourced that particular requirement. And the third one is funding. Now, traditionally and also now, IDZs are not funded for skills development and enterprise development, unfortunately. They are funded for infrastructure and operations. So we had to go and find our own budgets and sources of funding for skills development. Hence, that is also a very important element of the pillars of skills development. You will then see that the three cannot exist without the other. When we started way back in 2013, we said we didn't have, in fact, we had a few private training institutions, and also we had a West Coast College, which was long-standing. And with that regard, and also the programs that was offered was not programs that was linked directly to marine manufacturing and oil and gas. So that was a challenge at the beginning. The second challenge was funding, and then we said we had people to be trained, because there are people who are looking for opportunities. All two those challenges in terms of places, funding, and people has been overcome, and it is now standing. Hence, we can roll out skills development programs. Our scope, and this is really the question really when people ask us, what is it that you guys are offering? What type of programs are we offering? And what type of skills are we developing within the IDZ? I said earlier on, it is vast. Unfortunately, it's not a few set of skills that we're developing. We develop from skills programs to learnerships, to apprenticeships, and also specialized skills programs, and also training programs. Is not only focused to those that seek employment, but it's also focused to those companies that want to develop their own internal employees. So we're also focusing on SMMEs, where it's necessary, we will come to the party and say, we can develop you, and then we can ensure, so that you can ensure you deliver a particular service to us. So our focus is in rig and marine vessel repair and maintenance. On the first bullet point, or the second bullet point, that is actually our general stuff. It's rig repair, shipbuilding, boat building. There we're looking at skills and occupations and trades like welding, boiler making, corrosion protection, hydraulics, pneumatics. It is vast. We can stay in the whole day and identify those programs. And then equipment fabrication, repairs, maintenance, including general manufacturing, fabrication, support services. The same. If you look at that requirement, it is also the same skills you're going to need in terms of your welders, your boiler makers, your fitters. And it's also targeted towards general maintenance in any process and operation. And then the last one is logistics, supply, support. Now, logistics, what we're looking there at, we're looking at things like your overhead crane operators, your forklift operators, also your freight and forwarding, and that is also another area that we're going to, if everything goes according to plan, that we want to try to roll out during this year. Now, this is the important area for suppliers of skills development. It is the legislative framework and also the skills development policy that actually guides us in terms of how we must develop skills, under which circumstances, and also the requirements and the quality. I must admit that the past 2-3 years we had some successes with service providers, but we also had some failures and huge challenges when it comes to this regard. Now, I said earlier, we are facilitating skills development. Now, when it comes to the requirements for companies to be a training center, we are not setting the rules. What we are doing is we are actually assisting to enforce those rules. It is not our competency. Our interventions must be in line with relevant national and provincial skills development legislature, which is not negotiable, and comply with various regulations. Now, SBIDZ typically accredit training centers, and also the QCTOs of recent, the quality. So what we'll require, as Dale said earlier, we will say you must comply with your CITB, with your CSD, and all those requirements. But then these requirements are also secondary requirements in terms of skills development when to set up a training center. And we are not the competent institution to accredit training centers. What we basically do is we will tell you if you want to do welding or if you want to do boiler making, these are the requirements, these are the particular accreditations for certain programs, and then you must engage with a particular seater. Now the three or four main seaters that we're working with, and we form excellent relationships with them. They're assisting us, and they also help us to assist prospective training centers. Is the MERS seater, that is the manufacturing seater. They're looking at the engineering side, and then it is the Chieta, the chemical seater, almost related, but what we are doing with the chemical seater is because some of the programs are overlapping. We're also looking at the same thing: production technology, welding, boiler making, etc. TETA is the transport seater, and with the TETA, our targeted interventions there are your operators, your forklift operators. And recently, they've also brought on your commercial diving, ROV operators. And then the last seater that we are not working directly with, but in terms of the quality assurance, where we have to, is the construction seater. Very challenging to work with that seater, but we are rolling out infrastructure, and to roll out infrastructure, civils, buildings, you just saw that and presented that we're going to build our access park, which is the building. So the construction seater is one of the other seaters also that is relevant that you work with. What we've done is we've actually extended Zuko standing over there, the guy that stands there with the black jersey. Zuko and I actually extended beyond our own mandate to engage these seaters to ensure that wherever there's gaps, when you identify gaps within our suppliers of skills development who are appointed, we actually bring them in. We're actually at the level where we assist with the registration of the learners on the systems. We ensure that the external moderation is done, assessment is done, and that is how far we stretch ourselves to ensure that training service providers deliver to what they're supposed to do in terms of our contract with them. The relevant seater and QCTO accreditation, I spoke about that. And then monitoring and evaluation, this is very important. For you to be a service provider of skills development, unfortunately, it's a process that is extensively paper-driven, if I can put it that way. It is, you're dealing with paper on a daily basis. Your POEs, your portfolio of evidence, you must give us evidence as to how did you train the person. You must give us evidence of attendance registers. You must give us evidence of logbooks. And this is the area where service providers are actually falling out of the bus. The advantage of training is that we're paying you guys up front, and it's not rules set by us, also rules set by our funders, which is the seaters. So that's the benefit of training. But then there's a disadvantage that the outcome at the end of the day you might not get your final payments if you haven't met those outcomes. And that will be determined by the processes that you guys are going to put in place in terms of your monitoring and evaluation. Once again, Zuko is our skills project officer, and his particular focus is to assist, to be there on the training floor, to be there to assist wherever there's challenges. So anyone that is being appointed can call on him. Can't get hold of him, I'm also there to assist, to ensure that the M&E is adhered to, so that we develop the product at the end of the day, because the learner is our primary goal. We are more concerned about the learner. Secondary will be the service provider, but the learner, if you haven't done what you're supposed to do, you are not going to get paid at the end of the day. But that is not, we are not using that as a whip. That is just how legislation has been written by the seaters who fund us. Quality assurance in respect of the relevant ETQA. The ETQA is the Education, Training, Quality Assurance bodies. Now they are the ones that must enforce quality standards. Once again, it is not a competency of the IDZ. It is not my competency, nor is it Zuko's competency. What we are doing is we're taking the paper, we go to you, sorry, the rules, we go to you and we say, this is the framework that we're going to measure you on in terms of quality at the end of the day, whether someone is competent in a particular field that you have trained or not. I'm getting 50 people, and I want to get them out of this training center as soon as possible so that I can get my next 50. Unfortunately, it's not going to work because we are applying the quality assurance standards, and that is also done by the CETAs. And then the local presence in the Saldanha Bay municipal area. Now, providers from Cape Town and elsewhere would always ask me, but why can't we train people, wherever we are? There are two challenges to that. The one is, it is a cost implication on the IDZ. It is a huge cost implication. In 2013, we sent 14 learners for apprenticeships to Arms School in Simonstown. For the 18 months, we spent almost 3 million plus, I think, on accommodation, food, and transport. I could have trained over 250 people in skills programs with that money. So it doesn't make economic sense, to take people out of this comfort zone here and send them elsewhere to be trained. That's the first thing. The second thing in terms of the local presence is that our commitment is towards the people of Saldanha to be trained. That is our first start, okay? So in order to adhere to that particular commitment, we enforce the rule that your center must be here where the people are so that they can be trained. So those are the two rules that we apply in terms of the local presence. And then, this is also very important structure that we're working with, the Community Skills and Training Committee. Now, the Community Skills and Training Committee was really informed by the fact that people didn't trust, the fact that projects comes here, it trains people here, and it gives local people the jobs. Now, one of the biggest complaint was always that who will get the opportunity? Either of employment, because we're first going to train you, and our training is targeted towards employment at the end of the day, and upskilling going further. So the questions for the community was, or the concern was that, are we going to train people that live here? Now that in itself is a challenge to the IDZ because we only have limited capacity. We cannot determine who's local or not. We cannot determine whether you came here yesterday or you came here 10 or 20 years ago. That unfortunately we could not, but it was a concern that we had to take care of. So we thought it wise to establish the Community Skills and Training Committee, which consists of 2 members of each wards, of each of the 14 wards, how many was it? 14 wards in the municipal area. And they are elected from the ward committees. So they can account. So there's some way they account to. So they account to the speaker because the speaker is responsible for ward committees. So this is a committee that meets once a month, and we are not delivering any skills program or intervention without it being signed off by the Community Skills and Training Committee. You must also appreciate the fact that the Community Skills and Training Committee are obviously not specialists in training. So what we do every year, I think we had our strategic session, a workshop 2 months ago. We will take them on a workshop. I will then present to them what it's required, what our requirements are, what we need, what type of skills we want to implement. We'll go through the process, and if they object to those skills, we are not going to implement those skills. So the interventions that we've actually rolled out so far are all interventions that has been signed off and approved by the Community Skills and Training Committee. And we really see this relationship with the Community Skills Training Committee is strategic and very important. And also, the Community Skills and Training Committee, the very important thing, don't worry, they are not involved in procurement. So they cannot determine who trains, who gets trained or not. That is entirely a competent of Dale. What we're talking to the Community Training Committee is really only on the programs. And if there's an objection to someone, Patrick see that Patrick is in a program and someone objects that Patrick came in Saldanha or is not from Saldanha, we're just deferring that to, or referring it to the Community Skills and Training Committee, and they will then deal with that. And I think in conclusion, that is what we have to offer in terms of skills development. Our plans currently is to train till 2020, that's medium term. As I said, we're going to train beyond that, and our skills development programs starts from fundamental up until specialization. Thank you very much.
I think next on our program is our question and answer session. We've agreed that Ms. Kasia Fabiukas, our Stakeholder Relations Executive, will take charge of that. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Abby. So for those that don't know me, I'm Kasia Fabiukas. I'm the Executive for Stakeholder Management. And importantly, enterprise and skills development and marketing falls under my responsibility. And I thought, firstly, I want to say thank you to Abigail for arranging and marketing, for also supporting and arranging the event. I think from the 4 presentations that you've had today, there's quite a lot of information. So, first round open for questions from the audience on the enterprise development programs, on the infrastructure outlook, on supply chain, and on skills development programs and outlook as well. So any questions?
Yes, Serge Nguyenbai. Good morning. Could you please elaborate on the CMS, contractor management support? What kind of skills are you exactly looking for?
Well, the CMS, what we're looking for is someone, first of all, that comes from a construction background, all right, that has been on the construction in the field itself, not a design engineer sitting in an office. And what we are looking for is basically the skills in technical skills in construction. Then we are also looking at the softer skills that will be then the budgeting, that will be the plant hire, labor hire, labor quotations, how to quote for your labor, what type of labor you need. And then also the technical skills to assist the contractor to help them should they be, let's for example, we are doing a fence. Are they mixing the concrete wrong? Are they mixing it to the right strength? Is the fence in line or is it skew? So the CMS must have a construction background, but also someone that also knows how to put in a pay certificate, to pay for labor, to hire equipment, what equipment is needed, working out your bill of quantities properly.
So
yes.
That would be some kind of project management?
Not project management to say, no.
Or contract, there's
Contract
definitely a
management.
contract management,
That's
contract
right.
manager kind of profile.
That's right. You see, a project manager we have our project managers. They manage the project. They look at the whole aspect of the project. They're not there solely to support the contractor. So we do have our project managers on site that will basically look at your critical parts, and they will look at, is the project plan moving according to time, is the project in budget. And the project manager is mainly someone that reports back to us, the client. However, the construction manager is someone that supports the contractor, not just managing the project, but supports the contractor and supports the contractor in managing their business. So where the contractor would get stuck with a payment certificate, or should a variation order come into play? What is a variation order? Do I, for example, the ground that we are working on the Southwark land is calcrete ground. Do I get guys with spades to come and dig up the ground? Or do I get, so that is what this person must have construction experience, must have been actively involved in the construction field. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you. And this is the kind of position that are in the future are looking to be recruited by the IDZ? How does it place in terms of timeline with the IDZ itself?
What we've done when we looked at the contractor development program, we looked at, we don't want to put the contractors out there and then let them fail. The whole thing is that we want them to be successful because their success is our success. So what we looked at, we identified this construction management support, which is purely, mostly an individual, but it could be a company. Meaning that a company could go, or we could contract to a company, and then they will give us the individual or individuals that has the relevant construction experience. We are still busy deciding on the procurement method, whether it will be a procurement of one person, or it will be then the procurement of a company where there is several persons that have the relevant experience on site to assist our contractors. More?
Yeah. I think I've just asked Abby to pull up the slide again of the procurement model, and I think the intention really is to have the CMS as a daily support and mentor to the emerging contractor. And because what we've heard from the SMMEs that we've been dealing with and the subcontractors that we've been dealing with in our infrastructure projects thus far, as well as through consultation with the business forums, is that that mentorship is required to enable that contractor to take them from their current level, be it level 1 or level 2 or level 3, to the next level. And I think this mentorship role is a fundamental leg of the contractor development program, because in this new model, you have the emerging contractor as a contractor with a capital C. So now they have to take on the responsibilities and the accountabilities as a main contractor, not as a subcontractor or a subby anymore. And that puts a lot more pressures on the contractor, but it's an important element of the learning and development process. I think the CMS is, because this is a contract and it has a start date and an end date, it will be a fixed term contract for the projects that we roll out. We also have other various individuals or companies or role players, such as the occupational health and safety officer, environmental management, as well as the usual, professional teams. So there'll be the host of normal service providers that you find in an infrastructure project, contracted by the IDZ as the employer. We're just adding a new element in this mentorship role.
Okay, there's a few, there's one question I want to ask, but a few statements I want to make here. The first question is the requirements for the projects between 0 rand and 500,000 the same requirements for projects more than 500,000? And after I get that answer, I just want to make a statement. I understand all the rules you put there for quotations, like the Western Cape, you must fill in there, the central database, the CAID, with the levels you are. But the man mentioned there that when he put in a RFQ, that nobody responds on it, or nobody put in a quotation. And the reason therefore is that people, especially the local people, don't have the computers and all the things they must fill in for the central database. Because I fill my one in, and I'm telling you, you need a degree to do that. And the same for the Western database. You must fill in that thing manually, and it's just one mistake that kick you out. Now, how can you help the local people? The other thing is the labor, the work compensation. I applied for work compensation. You can't put a tender in if you don't have work compensation. I'm waiting now a year and a half for approval. And now till today, I can't put any tenders in because I'm waiting for this guy. You phone him, no answer. If they pick up the phone, they have no idea what you're talking about. You can go to the Labour Department in Cape Town, Kudu, all over you go. Now what's the use? You do this presentation, but nothing is linked with the other departments. Thank you.
The first part of the question was, is there a difference between the the quotation process and the formal tender process, there are, let's say this, the one standard for both processes is that you have to be registered on those databases, right? So whether you are submitting a quotation or whether you're submitting a formal tender, you have to be registered on those two databases. And the third one, the Construction Industry Development Board, if it's in the construction space. Then anything else is that when we ask for quotations between 0 and 500,000, you must be registered on those databases. You must submit a BE certificate because that is not a minimum requirement to be registered on the West Cape Supplier database. If you don't submit the BE certificate, they're not going to suspend you, they'll still register you. But if you want to compete for quotations, then you have to submit the BE certificate with the RFQ when you submit your quote. It becomes more complex when you talk about tenders. There are standard tender documents that must be submitted. I mentioned the ones for goods and services. The ones for the construction industry is quite similar, but there's additional ones. I didn't want to mention all of them. That's something I'd rather discuss on a one-on-one basis, which I've done with other contractors sitting in this room. And I'll take you through each of the documents, how to complete them, what information to provide. But I think the most important answer I can give you is make sure you're registered on the databases. And I'm going to agree with the gentleman, it is not easy. I had a case 2 weeks ago, I think, Abby, where somebody didn't have access. I came down from Cape Town. I sat here for an hour and a half to get somebody registered. And I might not have all the questions, but then I will make a way to get the questions answered on your behalf. And that person has since been registered. So I do offer the service. Abigail will mention some other people that do also offer the service, but if you want my contact details, you can get it from Abigail or from Kashifa, and I will come down and come help a few people to register on both databases, even with the CIDB.
Okay, so thank you very much for the question. With regard to the Western Cape Supplier Database and the Central Supplier Database, and even the Department of Labour, you must understand that it's not really, the IDZ core function to do that, but as Del mentioned, we do assist with that. I think some of you would remember that a month or so ago, we sent out a invitation because we did have a team from Treasury coming to our offices to help people register on the Western Cape Supplier Database and also the Central Supplier Database. And then also at our office, I must just commend Dale also for his availability. We do send out the forms. We have the forms because obviously Dale is he has a close working relationship with Treasury. So we do have the forms for the Western Cape Supplier Database. And Dale assists with completion of it just to check. And then even sometimes he even drives over there to go and deliver the forms. He normally tells me, Abby, this is my own time and my own money and so on. But he does that. So from the IDZ office, we do facilitate workshops where the Treasury team comes out to help facilitate with that. Also the CEDA office and the West Coast Business Development Sector offices locally, they also assist with that. And then with the Department of Labour, we've never engaged with them really. We understand the concerns with the workmen's compensation. But advice from us would then also be not to wait for when you are tendering to do these things. Maybe before you tender, try and initiate the deliberations and stuff for the Department of Labour. From our side, we can only, like I say, it's not our core function. We try to engage with them as far as possible to assist SMEs into getting themselves compliant. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's important, because we have a specific mandate. And because we are a public entity, we sit with one leg in government. So we're able to help these connections with the various competent departments who are responsible for these things. So with the Western Cape Supply Database, it would be ARIBA. With the Central Supply Database, it would be Treasury. And then with workmen's compensation, it would be the Department of Labour. So thank you for bringing and raising that issue with the Department of Labour. We will endeavour to connect with them and also bring them in as they are able to help facilitate any concerns coming from our suppliers. But I think it's important that you let us know if you're having problems with other departments in your registration so that we can respond to them appropriately. Any questions? Yes.
Good day. I actually just have a question for Dale itself. He didn't put it in his presentation, but I would like to know what is the success rate in terms of local development in local contractors, in terms of how much of your percentage of your budget in or contractors was from the local area and how much was from maybe from external or other companies. And I would also maybe say the same for Patrick, if you can see, maybe see some stats in terms of how much the development was actually done in terms of maybe figures or numbers and specific skills it was developed. Thank you.
Okay, and I think I'll take the next question.
Okay, I'm Rosina Snyders. I just want to ask a question to Boy Lakabani, Patrick Lakabani, sorry. Sorry dear. On-site trainings for contractors, because that's a big problem in our area, where you give training to individuals, but do you assist them when they're on site? And even small contractors, small and medium contractors who are for the first time on site doing RFQs, and nobody assists them during that phase to be on a secret level, like they start with level 1 and now you assist them to going through to level 4 or level 7, because we want to assist our people in our areas to going through to that levels where we remain in this time where the same people got big contracts and we didn't bring our people up to that levels. I thank you. There's the same question to Abigail. Thank you.
Okay. Third question, and then I'll ask.
Hi, my name is Divan. I am from Visual Production. I understand what is the core purpose of this small seminar, but I'm not in the industry. I'm speaking for many artists here in South Ghana. There's a quote that Will Smith said that if you don't do what you love every day, people's lives will suffer. So I just want to ask a question for Patrick Lakabane. How can we find the sources for students so that we can train them in art and in filmmaking, short filmmaking? Because there's no source for us here in South Ghana. We often have meetings, but we don't really engage with people in our world of entertaining. Thank you.
Let's address these three questions. So Dale, on the percentage of the budget to the local area, and then also Patrick, but I know the answer that it's everything.
Okay, that's a very important question. Thank you for asking it. I'm going to be very honest. It's going to be difficult for me to give you figures to say 14 million rand of our 100 million rand budget went to local SMMEs. So I'm going to ask that. We can probably get the stats. I can ask Hannes if we can speak afterwards, get the stats from our finance department. But I can give you some context in terms of how we approach our tenders, which I think is very valid for everybody here. Whether it is goods or services or construction industry, whether it is skills or enterprise development, we look local first. And our procurement strategy says that we look local first. And that is why Abigail's enterprise development database plays such a huge part in our procurement process. If there is opportunity for local contractors or local service providers, then we contact them directly. And what I mean is that we do not then advertise it in the wider media for Cape Town-based companies or Joburg-based companies to come and tender for work that should rightfully stay within the local community. That being said, a perfect example would be the fence contract now, where it's going to be awarded to possibly up to 8 local contractors, CIDB level 1 and 2. And if that, and I'm positive that it's going to work, it's going to be a good success story for the local community. And we're not talking about 100 or 200,000, we're talking about a few million. I can't give you the exact budget, obviously. On the other hand, where it is a larger project and there isn't the available CIDB grading locally, then we advertise the tender as wide as possible, but we do allow or we do enforce that the main contractor has to subcontract a certain percentage of the works to local contractors or suppliers or service providers. So in that instance, I can almost certainly say with some of the larger contracts thus far, I think we subcontracted between 50 and I think last time Hannes told me up to 35% for one of the contractors, where that's 35%, let's say, of a 100 million rand contract that is being invested in the local community. That's a lot of money. So like I said, I can't give you a definitive answer, but that's at least our approach and how we're going to do things going forward. If you look at some of the projects that Kaliso's mentioned that's going to be rolled out this financial year, we've already started discussions on what the potential is from the local community and where we can enforce maybe the bigger contractors, if we can't find somebody locally, to make use of a certain percentage for local contractors. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Skills development is almost like stats. There's always numbers involved. A lot of numbers. In terms of, let me first start with the suppliers. In terms of the suppliers that we use, all of those suppliers currently, except for in 2013 when we used Armscore, all of those suppliers are locally. Now you can actually differentiate between local, and those companies. There is maybe a Joburg or Cape Town-based company that actually set up the training center here. Now, I can tell you that out of 100%, almost 40% of those companies are local, meaning it is local companies, there are residents from Saldanha, and those companies, I must admit that we've actually had a great deal in ensuring that they comply and in ensuring that they establish themselves. We had to be actively involved and go out of our way to ensure. It is, for instance, the company does the rigging, some of the companies does welding and electrical. So in terms of our targets on local companies as service providers, we've met around about 40% thereof, because I was just calculating in terms of the numbers of service providers we have currently. In terms of the learners themselves, we have four projects so far. The first one is the ITEMA project, which is skills programs. And those skills programs are looking at the fundamentals training in welding, boiler making, mechanical fitting, electricians. So these are people that know nothing about the industry. There, we spent 10 million and we've trained 678 learners. Now, because they've been signed off by the Community Skills and Training Committee, it then means they're all local. So we had no issues of whether those 678 were local or not. The second program is a tutor program, which is funded by Chemical Seater. And the tutor programs then look at the high level, which is the learnerships. And there we're looking at, we did 50 rigging learnerships, 50 production technology learnerships. And that program also, the service providers there, both those service providers are local service providers. And also the learners, it's the 100 in terms of the learnership has been met. And then we also have our apprenticeship programs, which is the third level in terms of the hierarchy and unfortunately in the apprenticeships, the numbers are a bit lower because the entry requirements to learnerships are higher than your skills programs and your learnerships, because it's matric and maths and science and et cetera, et cetera. We have committed so far around about 80. I'm talking on a correction, we'll give you the exact numbers. We've committed so far around about 80 in apprenticeship, which I think is good. In 2013, when we started the apprenticeships, we thought we were going to train 100 plus annually. We advertised for 30 positions. We could not fill 7 from the local community. But the constraint is the entry requirements. It's not that people don't want to be trained, but that entry requirement is unfortunately a bit too high. And then we had to go deep down to our skills programs. We are now currently rolling out what we call our Siakula. Now we're using all these names because Itemba is like hope, it means closer hope, and Siakula means grow. So what we're doing currently is that we take those 678 learners we've trained in our basic fundamentals. We are now giving them higher, more advanced skills programs, which is around about 80 credits. And the numbers there are 380 in that program. In fact, we are now in the process of the tenders and the RFQs and the TORs, and we intend to roll out those programs out around about June. And also, what we've done also, besides human capital development per se, in terms of the person, we've also trying to develop, although enterprise development does that, we're also assisting in developing companies. On the fence programs, we are now going to roll out the supervisors program. So what we've done is, let's say, infrastructure is busy with the fence program, how can we assist as a skills development unit? And then we said, we're going to identify two persons per contractor, take them, spend 20,000 per person on them, and develop their supervisory skills, so that we can ensure that when they deliver that program, it is done with the necessary skills. We also targeted another company that wants to roll out fiber optic cables, because it's going to happen in the IDZ. So we are going to develop that company, send them away, give them training in fiber optic, how to lay those cables out so they can offer the service back to us. So those are the things. And also these companies, they are all local companies in terms of, just to give you a direct answer. Okay, the last one is in terms of these soft skills. So the one challenge with the soft skills is the issue of funding. I said in my presentation that we are not funded for skills development. It's something that we need to go out and seek the funding for. We are very successful in doing that, so that is not a challenge at this stage. But because the IDZ is sector specific, funding institutions also want to benefit and want to come to the party in terms of this particular sector. So it is easy for us to get that money in terms of the sector specific training needs. But looking at the softer skills, even there is a bit challenging. Softer skills like your arts, your film. What we've done now, I managed to cut a part of my budget to say, outside of the core of the scope that I spoke about, maybe we should look at softer skills. And what I've done is, for instance, I said, can't we train 50 people in driver's license? A project that we want to do in partnership with Transnet, because Transnet, Patrick, we can train 50. Can you guys train 50? Which is, as you can see, outside of our project. So we are now starting to look at your non-core programs, film and film and related. The question that we must ask ourselves, is it going to add value to our mandate? Because we are also governed by a particular mandate, and that is something that we must not lose focus of. I was sitting in a community skills and training committee when person said, and Kashiva was there, block manner. Block manner, I don't know what you know. Block manner is, butcher, able to us. And I said, but what value is there for abattoirs? Because when someone gives us money, they want to get value for that money. If they say, give you money to train abattoirs, then it must be someone that will get value out of that. And unfortunately, those type of people are not in the space that we find ourselves into. So it's going to be difficult to focus on those skills, unfortunately. We also have limited capacity. In the skills development unit, we are 4, and we must train across the board. I am not going to stand here and lie to you and say, yes, let's look at it. I'm going to tell you that it is, the challenge with that, it is outside of our mandate, directly outside. And the second thing is, we must actually ask ourselves, what value can we get out of that as the IDZ itself? I know Kashifa is busy with a project that is called Open Saldana. And Open Saldana is actually focused, she'll talk more about it, at those things. How do we look at the socio-economic development outside of the IDZ? Looking at combating drug abuse, substance abuse, and all those things. And those type of programs might actually help in that. I hope I've answered the questions so far, but we can take it offline if there's some stuff that I haven't answered. Rosina, now what happens is, in terms of, the question was really the practical, the on-site training. You see, training programs are designed by the relevant seaters, and we actually take it from them. So we don't design training programs. But I can assure you that all our training programs has both those two competence in terms of the theory and also the practical. In our skills programs, we would typically give theoretical training in a training center, and we'll also give a workplace exposure. That has been done. We are not paying a training center or a service provider if they cannot prove that the person went to site, there's a logbook, there's a attendance register, and also what they've done there. That is, but there are also those programs where that is not a necessity. For instance, bricklaying. You know, in a training center, they teach you about bricklaying, and in that particular training center, you build the wall. You know, so you don't need to take you to site, because that is how the program has been designed. Apprenticeships, by all means, is not negotiable. Learnerships also, 70% of all learnerships must be workplace exposure. 30% is theoretical. So yeah, we are complying to that. We also find a lot of people coming to us, not been trained through our programs, somewhere else, but then ask, can't you guys assist with workplace or experiential learning? And where we can, we rope them in, and then we engage with workplaces. At this stage, it's a huge challenge, it's a national challenge. We don't have enough workplaces for our learners to get practical training. So we have to be very smart. What we've done now, for instance, we've signed an agreement now with the mine in Hopefield, because they have a particular workplace. Now you must remember, it's outside of our scope, not our scope of the IDZ. We said to them, listen, if we're going to fund these learners, will you make available the workplace so that they can get the practical training within the mine itself? And we've reached an agreement. And those are that's how innovative we become to ensure that people get their workplaces during the training. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, this question is not necessarily on the enterprise development, but more on the gas and oil industry itself. Obviously, with the oil price that has been low for the last couple of years, are any forecast in terms of what's going to happen in the let's say the oil industry? Do we see more rigs, or when will the rigs actually coming in more? And then the second question is also on the gas. Are there plans to actually import natural gas, or is it mainly focused on the LPG, or what's the gas part of the oil and gas industry of the IDZ?
Thank you. I can answer the question directly. So with regards to the oil price, what we've learned is that the oil price is cyclical. It goes up, it goes down. The same oil price lows that you see today were in the oil industry, I think 10 years ago, and then it went into its boom phase where it was over $100 a barrel. So I think a lot of people are accepting that the oil price is cyclical, and that you need to always be very mature in your business practices, then understanding that you might have a boom period, you might have a bust period. And how the industry has responded for this, what they call lower for longer environment, is really, some projects have been shelved. There's no denying that. But it's those projects that were inherently expensive to begin with. So, and what we're seeing now is also that, and this, on your second point then of the rigs, that we've always maintained that we say oil and gas, and the IDZ is about oil and gas, but it's much more than oil and gas. There's the marine and the maritime industry that supports oil and gas, and that industry is stable irrespective of the oil price. So you might not find rigs coming in as much as before, or rigs as active as they were before, but boats, tugs, barges, other types of vessels still need to be manufactured and still need to be repaired to sustain this industry. So when we say oil and gas, it's a shorthand really. What we're actually talking about is that full value chain. It's oil, it's gas, and the marine industries. So there is sustainability in that offering of the IDZ going forward. With regards to your third point on the natural gas, the IDZ is a manufacturing estate, if you will. It's a manufacturing and fabrication estate, if you will. We aren't directly affected by the natural gas plans and the LPG and the LNG projects. But we do see a benefit for us and for our industries going forward. If those projects land, then all that equipment and piping needs to be manufactured somewhere. So the IDZ will benefit if those projects come off. but we aren't dependent on those projects coming off, if I can say it to you that way. Now, obviously, these projects are these decisions get made at a national level. So for us, it's an international market. So for us, it's more of we participate where we can and we contribute where we can, but we maintain our focus on our manufacturing industries, and our fabrication industries, and our repair industries. To recap what you've seen today. So we wanted, our Supplier Awareness Days is a way of us communicating with suppliers on the various opportunities that will come from the IDZ. What and how we structure it in the conversation with you is that we have our infrastructure program, and then we have our long-term, the real big thing, which is the oil and gas and marine development. Now, our infrastructure program, as Abigail has reiterated from the beginning, is a need for now. We need to put the infrastructure in to unlock the land, to make it attractive for investors to come to Saldanha. It's a short-term venture. Once we put that infrastructure in, we will probably not need those types of services going forward. Going forward, our tenants will need suppliers in the oil and gas and marine space. So goods and services that Abigail spoke of. So that's why we've split it out in terms of there's infrastructure and the contractor development program that has a start and an end date. And then there's enterprise development that will have really in perpetuity, as well with skills development then, which tries to develop a workforce for the infrastructure, but only in certain types of occupations and for certain types of projects. And then skills, as Patrick was saying, for the long haul, for the rig repair, for the vessel, for the maintenance and manufacturing industries, for the logistics services. So I think I would like to reiterate to the suppliers in the room, if you're from the construction industry and the built environment industry, there are projects coming, and we are trying to localize them as best as possible, understanding that the scope of these projects, some of them are easier to implement on a contractor development program, like the fencing. Some of them will be more difficult, like the Access Complex, which will be a multi-story building, and it will be a high-value project. On the enterprise development side, specifically for the oil and gas and marine industries, Abigail is spearheading an initiative to really understand what do we have in Saldanha? What service do you provide? What is your standards? What is your competence? So that she can help close that gap by working with other partners. And I think so you'll hear and you'll see a lot more communications from our enterprise development, from Abigail going forward in that assessment phase. Lastly, Dale spoke about supply chain management. There haven't been much changes in the regulatory framework, but I think the key point is we need to comply with the law. And so we need to pass that compliance on to yourselves. And you need to respond to allow us to procure from you. And so if you are having problems in complying with the Western Cape Supply Database, the Central Supply Database, the CIDB, and responding to tenders and quotations, you need to allow us the opportunity to reach out. You need to contact us and let us know of the challenges that you're facing. Lastly, with Patrick, on skills development, he alerted you to what we've been doing in the past with our skills programs and how we've used local suppliers. And our intention is to use local suppliers as much as possible going forward, because we really need to make sure that we maximize the funding that we get. We would rather have more students on the program than have less students and the training be happening in Cape Town, where you have more transport fees, more accommodation fees and such like. And I think lastly, with Patrick's focus and what he said is, we train for everything, but what we try to do, everything relevant for our industry. But what we're trying to do is really build that skills pipeline. So we take the students from the skills programs to the learnership to the apprenticeship, because at the end of the day, we need to see value in the funding that we're allocating. I think that's all from our side. Thank you so much for your attention and your attendance today. We'll be around, various of us will be around for the next hour to discuss one-on-one with you any questions and queries that you might have. But please, the coffee and tea station is open now. Thank you.